I have seen The Batman, and it is phenomenal. More right after this. Hey, what's happening, Internet K-Wing here, and you guys wanted to know my thoughts on the Batman movie, and well, it's going to be a long video, so I hope you enjoy. Before I start, don't forget to like, comment, and share this video, as well as subscribe if you're new. So the Batman movie is more of a detective story than it is a actual Batman film or a superhero film. To my knowledge, this is the longest we've ever seen Batman on screen in costume as Batman. He's in probably 80% of the 3-hour runtime in costume, which I loved. Like in the comics, Batman self-monologues more than he talks, which is awesome. Just like in the comics, most of the time, Robert is using his eyes and body language to tell the story from Batman's point of view. Characters interact with him and he remains completely silent, which I dug. That works for Batman, and it really works for Robert's acting in this movie. Unlike previous Batman films, we actually get to see Bruce solving crimes as a detective. It's not just sitting at a computer solving crimes like Bale and Affleck did. No, Batman actually investigates crimes. He also breaks into the crime scenes and steals evidence just like Batman in the books. He works with Alfred to solve the Riddler's puzzles in the movies together, which was great, and the police call him in to assist them when really bad cases occur. He isn't a bumbling Batman like critics have said, and Jim does all the work. That's a lie. Jim works with Batman like he's his partner, more so than in Nolan's Dark Knight, too. I really love the dynamic between Commissioner Gordon, or rather in this film, Lieutenant Gordon, and the Batman. They work together as a team, good cop and bad cop. While I'm on this, no, the movie is not anti-cop either, so stop that rhetoric, that's dumb. Jim isn't the good apple in a bad bunch in this film. Even Gordon explains later in the movie, during a certain spoiler, not everyone in the city works for them and is dirty. That was really nice to see, and there are a ton of officers that show up of all nationalities that are standing there to arrest the big bad. It was really cool to see that, and it showed that not all the police were dirty. While Batman isn't very trusting of the police, he does work with them. In the prequel novel, he worked with a few cops before ever meeting Gordon. In this movie, he opens up to a beat cop who guards the crime scenes. In the film, well, the officer, they don't really like each other in the beginning. Over the course of the movie, Batman tends to see this guy as, someone he can kind of rely on, and the officer stops calling Batman a freak and sees him as the hero that's actually trying to save the city. So there's a lot of little relationships that start in this film that I hope we get to see expanded in other movies. I really want to see a lot of these actors come back to, reprise their roles too, in so many different subsequent series and spin-offs of Matt Reeves' Batverse. Now, the reason why some people are using that narrative that Batman hates police in this movie is because they're referencing the GCPD chase sequence where Batman is forced to punch Jim to escape a situation. And, there was a purpose to that whole scene. Batman was stuck at the Gotham City Police Department and couldn't get out. He was surrounded by officers. Jim actually helps him escape by putting on a show. The police then go after Batman because they saw him threaten and then attack Commissioner Gordon, or James Gordon, Lieutenant Gordon, whatever you want to call him. And so they pursue after him as a dangerous fleeing subject and are able to use lethal force. In the comics, this also happened a lot in Batman Year One. Quite often. Anyway, back to the detective elements for this movie. Like the prequel novel establishes, Batman has a crime lab and is very proficient at forensic science. Though in the movie, he doesn't use his Batcave very much. In fact, you would actually see more of the Batcave underneath Wayne Tower if we were to use that little Oreo promotions thing where you can do kind of like a look online of the Batcave and really explore it. We only see it a few times in the actual movie, which I thought that was a shame. And for the most part, you can only really see his crime lab and his Bat computer, as well as you can see the Batmobile off in the distance. While Batman doesn't utilize as many gadgets as we've seen in previous Batman films, for a year or two, he still has a pretty decent arsenal, and it's very practical. He carries a carpenter's utility belt, and he has a few gadgets that he uses over the course of the movie. He's a pretty clever guy. He also has very unique ways of gaining access to materials that the police won't share with him, such as his contact lenses. A camera is actually in each of Batman's eyes that gives off kind of like this demonic slash whitest look to his eyes. So almost comic accurate, but you can still see, it's a dude's eyes, like through the mask. They can also be used for both recording footage or live streaming things. The feed connects to both the Bat computer and a field computer or portable laptop that Bruce uses in the field. We actually see him in the movie on Jim's car. He pulls out his laptop and puts it right on the lieutenant's car. Jim looks kind of annoyed, like, hey man, why are we using my car for your computer? But, Batman just kind of looks at him and they start typing. So I thought that was pretty neat. So anyway, the feed actually connects directly to the Bat computer. And the eye is basically like the Arkham games. It's able to identify criminals with face recognition technology, which we saw in the movie, though since this is experimental tech, it takes time to work properly, mind you. The feed had issues in the movie, and inside the club, it takes a little bit longer than 30 seconds or so in order to identify its targets. His grapple gun is actually attached to his wrists in this. They're arrow-like weapons that he has on his gauntlets, and he can refill when he needs to. He only has one Batarang in the movie, and he actually wears it on his chest. He uses it a few times in the film, but never as a throwing object, just for cutting things, getting into crime scenes, opening doors, slicing things, and then he puts the Batarang or bat knife or whatever he calls it right back on his chest, and it just kind of like clicks into place. They don't really go into details about what that Batarang is made of. Some people say that it's based after the gun that killed his parents. I believe Matt Reeves said that in an interview, but it's never really mentioned upon in the movie, and I never really remember that detail in the prequel book either. Maybe in later Matt Reeves' Batman projects, they'll talk a little bit more about the weapon, especially when maybe Dick Grayson comes into the picture, and, we could get a little sequence about that. Maybe Batman is traumatized seeing Dick Grayson's parents die, and he remembers how his parents died, and he uses the gun as like a memento that he carries with him for justice and for vengeance or something like that. But of course, it's melted into a Batarang. They don't really get into it, but that's what he uses the Batarang for. It's a cutting tool. Other gadgets that he uses in this movie are very small, like C4 explosives that he kind of did to create a smoke screen for him later in the movie. Didn't have a very big explosion, but he used these small little circular discs to blow up, we'll say, some glass so he could come in, as well as to blow up a hydrogen tank so he could use it to conceal himself. He had some other like computer tech gadgets that happened so quickly that you're just kind of like, oh. So like I said, they don't really focus a lot on the gadgetry in this movie, but again, it's a year 2 Batman, so we'll see more of that as time goes on. Batman uses fear very differently in this movie than we've seen in previous Batman films. One key element is actually the bat signal is kind of a weapon that isn't just used for delivering messages to him from cases that Gordon or the police has, but it's also a warning to criminals when they see the signal in the sky that Batman is out prowling the streets of Gotham at night. He can't be everywhere, as Bruce's monologue says, but criminals stop in their tracks when they see the light in Gotham skies, running away in fear of what could happen to them. We see this during the opening of the movie as criminals are stealing and committing crimes, but once they think that Batman is around every corner or hiding in a dark alleyway or is behind them, they freak out and run away in fear. I absolutely love this sequence. The next fear tactic that Batman uses in this movie is his footsteps. In the film, he's walking around as an almost supernatural element to the picture. He is purposely doing this, though, so that criminals and the police and his targets know that the Batman is coming closer. However, if he wants to sneak up on someone ninja-style unseen, like Ben Affleck or Bale's Batman, Robert can do so as well, whenever he wants to. Especially when he first meets Catwoman, he does this to spook her because she's robbing some type of safe, and then Batman appears without making any sound, and then they fight, and that was great. he also likes to sneak up on Jim Gordon whenever he uses the bat signal, but it's not to the same comedic effect that it was in the Nolan films where, Jim kind of like, oh, I'm going to have a heart attack that you're there. It's almost like Jeffrey knows that the Batman is there, and he's just so used to it, which I kind of like. I really do like their relationship, and I like how Gordon isn't really afraid of him at all. I think that's kind of cool. To my knowledge, this is the first Batman film where he actually uses his footsteps to kind of scare people, building up the suspense of his arrival, though it's only briefly hinted at in the novel that he does this. Like Bale's Batman, fear is this Batman's greatest weapon, and he wields it so well, using the environments to his advantage as well. Even his car instills fear. The Batmobile in the movie is almost otherworldly, like a demon on wheels. It lights up and roars into the night. Not your typical Batmobile at the start, but an important tool for Batman in the long run. Turning on the car in the theater, it had this booming and roaring effect. Like you could hear it all over the place. People were cheering in our packed showing. The car itself doesn't have gadgets, though. Maybe in due time in later films they'll do that. It's more or less just a pursuit vehicle, and strong like a tank. Penguin knocks over some stuff during a pursuit, like some type of a semi is hauling like these big cement cylinders, and the Batmobile just crashes through it like it's pottery or something. The thing just shatters, and the Penguin is kind of mortified when he sees these giant cement cylinders easily smashed like a tank just rolled into them as the Batmobile comes closer in the movie. So that was really interesting to see that happen. The Batmobile has a jet engine equipped and bulletproof armor, and Batman in the film uses it to ram Penguin's car off the road, similar to how police actually in real life will use like a battering ram to kind of like, take really dangerous criminals off the streets. Batman does the same thing with his hot rod Batmobile. Speaking of armor, let's talk about the Batsuit. For the past 2 years, Bruce has been putting together his suit from different Wayne tech and other places. It's a makeshift Batsuit that is also able to withstand machine gun fire, shotguns from a distance, knives up front, and fire. It also has durability from explosions and collisions. Bruce cannot take a shot to the face, though, since this mask is made of a leather Kevlar and is not as strong as his body armor plating, which you'll see in the movie, and I'm not going to spoil that for you, but his chest armor is very, very strong, which is something that Batman in the comics has done and in the Arkham games to kind of protect himself, especially early on. But of course, we know that Batman later goes for armor that won't necessarily deflect and hurt other people, because there are people that die in this movie because of Batman's actions, but he doesn't directly kill people. Thugs basically shoot each other when he dodges, or ricochets from the bullets that he's being shot bounce off and hurt other people. So yeah, that's a little bit different, and I'm sure they'll probably address that later on. Another tool for him to use is the wingsuit, and I gotta be honest, I wasn't a real fan of this wingsuit. It looked really dumb. Instead of Batman, he looked like a flying squirrel. A serious scene then became comedic, even had Batman hit his head after the jump. It felt out of place. I understand the realism involved with Reeves' movie, but I just didn't like what they were going for in that sequence. But anyway, let's talk about the plot of the movie. So, as I said, this film is essentially a detective-driven narrative, or a detective noir setting type thing. Like The Dark Knight, the movie opens up with the Riddler basically being the big bad committing a horrible crime. In The Dark Knight, the Joker had the famous bank heist sequence. In this movie, the Riddler is stalking the mayor, and he kills him, and then he's the guy that you see in the trailer with the face that says "No More Lies." So the Riddler is basically stalking these high-profile Gotham people that he feels is responsible for the city being in the decline in the shape that it is. In his own mind, the Riddler sees himself as a champion of vengeance, and that it is his job to root out corruption. But then, basically, the movie jumps the shark in the final arc, which I call the fourth arc of the movie, because it's a 3-hour film. There's no way it has a chapter 1, 2, and 3. It's got a chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, because there's so much in this movie, which is not a bad thing. I don't understand why people complain about the runtime. I had no problem. I was sitting there eating my nachos and my candy, and I was having a blast. There was no problems whatsoever. Amber was holding on for dear life on my hand, but, other than that, it was totally fine. I was able to make notes in my head and really pay attention to a lot of things that were happening, which is kind of amazing considering my hand was like numb most of the movie, because there were parts of this film that really did scare her. But yeah, Riddler is essentially the villain of the movie, although there are some other bad guys that have key roles, but they'll be fleshed out as the Batverse continues. This is more or less a Riddler story, and it's a Batman story. It's about finding out who the serial killer is, what's his motive, stopping him, and then saving the day. It's a pretty simple plot, but it's a really fun Batman movie from start to finish, so I have no issue with that. The Riddler, you'll have to actually read the prequel book to get a lot of history on him. He has a couple scenes that I feel like could have been cut from the movie because more or less it's the same stuff that happened in the Batman novel. I don't really feel like they needed to get into that because it just felt like kind of unnecessary exposition, because based on this character, you don't really want to care for him at all. He's an ex-employee of a hierarchy person in Gotham. He discovered some stuff, and then he decides to become like this champion of the people. But at the same time, he's not a champion of the people. He's just this disgruntled worker who is basically taking down people and trying to get clout. He is a form bottom feeder that is a very ugly version of society that people are trying to paint as a connection to the January 6th incident in real life. But in reality, this guy is basically Antifa. That was kind of like a little shifted in my seat a little bit. He's full-blown crazy too, so it makes sense that he ends up in Arkham. It's not a spoiler, it's in the trailers. The guy is very eccentric. His only joy in life is doing puzzles and deciphering codes and leaving people weird riddles and things like that. That's his whole thing in life. That's what he gets the most joy of. And, they try to make you feel bad for him, but they really don't do a good job in the movie. Like, he is a psychopath in the film. In the book, I'm not going to lie, the prequel book, I did feel some type of, what's the word I'm looking for? I felt sorry for him because he was an orphan that had a lot of bad things happen to him. The way he looked kind of nerdy and stuff like that, he was picked on, kind of like the runt of the litter of the orphanage. He grew up hating Bruce Wayne, which they don't really tell you that until near the end of the movie, So, I mean, and the reason why he hated Bruce Wayne is because the orphanage that these kids came from was donated by Thomas Wayne, because just like a famous Batman comic book, Thomas Wayne basically was going to run for mayor because he wanted to clean up the city. He was not a bad person. He did one bad thing that had a ripple effect. And, I was really happy to see that he wasn't a mob boss. That made me very happy. He approached the wrong person, and that person didn't misunderstand what Thomas Wayne wanted when this reporter was sniffing around about Bruce's mom. One thing led to another, and the guy did shut the reporter up, but he killed the person. So then Thomas Wayne was going to go to the police with evidence that this guy killed the reporter and was going to do the right thing. And then, Thomas and Martha died that very night in front of Bruce, and the story continues on. So this is not the telltale gangster story. This is not anything really bad. Matt Reeves actually knows what he's doing. At first, I thought he was kind of like going to borrow from a lot of modern stuff, the way that Zack Snyder did with his interpretation of Batman and that. But he didn't. For the most part, the Waynes are still this very important symbol in Gotham, and they were even more important to Gotham because they literally gave their house up as an orphanage. He donated $1 billion to help with fixing Gotham. He did a lot of great things, just like Bale's, Wayne family did, being like these pillars of goodness in the city. And of course, their story ends the same way. So that was interesting to see. Riddler has kind of like this fringe group on a YouTube live stream. He only has 500 followers, and he kind of acts like some channels on YouTube. There's a lot of screaming involved, and their chat rooms are not like my chat rooms on YouTube. Like, they're very toxic and very dangerous. And that was, I don't know, that hit home a little bit too much. I was just kind of like, okay, this is really weird. But again, as I was telling people on Twitter a while ago, basically with the Batman movies, whether it's Nolan movies or Keaton's movies or Reeves movies, they borrow a lot from real life scenarios. So, the 80s Batman movies was a lot about like Joker being a mob boss. The Nolan films, the Dark Knight trilogy, was about Joker being this agent of chaos in a post 9/11 world, which we still don't know if he was an ex-soldier or what, but he was a guy who just wanted to watch the city burn. He was a agent of chaos, and the Riddler is a person with a plan who does horrible, horrible things. And, I still think that the Joker is a better portrayal for Heath Ledger. He still felt like the Joker. For me, the Riddler is the weakest part of this movie. This is just me talking as, someone who really understands the mythos of Batman. Yes, he did riddles. Yes, he had puzzles. But I mean, he, at the end of the day, was just a combination of Hush. He was a combination of the Holiday Killer from The Long Halloween. And he didn't feel like the Riddler at all. Even when Batman finally defeats him, he doesn't feel like the Riddler. Feels like this unknown guy that it took a lot of courage for him to go out and kill people. And he was just kind of this ranting lunatic on YouTube. That's all really the Riddler is. As he stalks people, he's very hesitant to kill you. And then when he does, he gets like really into it. So I mean, he's just a serial killer. He's just a bad guy. He's not a redeemable character. Whereas when you watch some of these other Batman villains in past films, you feel really bad what happened to Harvey Dent in the Nolan trilogy. The Joker you kind of want to know more about, but at the same time, you know that the Joker is a very bad person. He's a very sinister and evil genius. The Riddler, it just feels like everything kind of fell into place the way that it happened. And he had an accomplice throughout the whole movie, which I'm not going to spoil for you. I'm going to try to do spoilers in a bigger video. That kind of helped him make everything happen. Without this person, the Riddler's plan never would have succeeded. He needed a very big element of his plan. And I thought that aspect was kind of interesting. But, it was kind of predictable for me. So, yeah, the Riddler for me just didn't work. I really want to talk about Jim Gordon. I liked Jim Gordon in this film. Jeffrey Wright did a fantastic job, and this Jim Gordon feels very different than Gordon that was portrayed in the Dark Knight trilogy. Like, this is a different version of Gordon. This is a more laid-back Jim. He's not as uptight. He's a very different Gordon than Gary Oldman, and I like that. It felt kind of like the relationship that this Gordon had with Batman is very reminiscent to Batman the Animated Series, and you can just feel that when you're watching the movie. The only element that was missing was, which I wish, because I wanted to see a little more comedy in this movie. I really wish that they would have done the disappearing Batman thing and had Wright kind of play into the, I hate how he disappears. I'm going to nail his feet to the ground. Because you could just see this Jim Gordon having that type of like witty reply. He's actually kind of like the sort of comedic role in this movie. He says things that made the audience laugh a few times because it felt like that old cop that was hanging out with the rookie. And sometimes the older cop would say something that just was hilarious for, the area that they were in. And it worked for the scene, but it wasn't meant to be a joke. It was kind of like smart humor, but it's not like an MCU film. I really hate that a lot of the critics that saw this movie mark this movie down because it wasn't an MCU movie. They also didn't like the fact that the film was dark. And I'm just kind of like scratching my head like, what? I mean, it's the Batman. What did you think it was going to be? Sunshine and rainbows? I don't really understand. They assumed because of race swapping characters that the film was going to be like this MCU movie, and it wasn't. I will say this, like, Gordon is one of the really good parts of this film. Like, his character that we only see at work and working with Batman, I want to see more of him. I feel devastated that Jeffrey Wright is not going to get his HBO Max series, and they're going to do the Arkham and the Penguin thing instead. It just, that feels like a dire shame because you want to see more of these GCPD characters. You want to see Gordon's unit that obviously he's going to make after the events of the movie, which I'm not going to get into. Where the movie's going to go into, you'll have to watch my spoiler video. But it feels like that is kind of a shame because this is a character that you want to see more of, and I think that his Gotham show would be better than the Gotham show we had on Fox all those years ago. There's a great group that I think Gordon could put together of famous Batman characters that are police officers that would be really interesting to see them handle things in Gotham. But after the events of the movie, I don't think that's really possible. But yeah, he was a great breakaway character for me. I liked him, and I want to see more of his performance. It felt like the animated series, the 70s kind of Jim Gordon from the what's known as the Bronze Age DC Comics, and less like the Gary Oldman one, which is great. Gary Oldman worked for kind of the Frank Miller version of Jim Gordon, and we're going to get to see a more traditional Jim with the Batgirl movie, which I still don't know what type of Gordon J.K. Simmons is trying to portray because we haven't seen a lot of Gordon from that. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with the Batgirl should the movie even come out this year. But that's let's not get into that. There's a lot going on with DC films at the moment. But anyway, I really liked Jim, and I thought that especially the breakaway scene for me that I loved, which I kind of hinted at, is something happens with Batman where he survives an explosion from the serial killer incident, and the police are all hovered around him, and they're trying to get his mask off, and Jim steps in, and then, you know, this one, I think it's Commissioner Loeb, the guy before Jim, who really hates Batman, and he's trying to basically be this guy that makes his crusade against Batman, just like in the Year One Frank Miller books. And he's also trying to look really big in front of the other officers. He speaks kind of like this. He's like, Jim, what are you doing here? I want this guy out of here. And Jim's like, hey, just, you know, hold on a sec. It's like, you know, he's very important in this case because this Riddler guy is writing to him. You know, he's got a very soft-spoken, kind of deep voice. And I like that. I dig that for Jim. But anyway, when Batman comes to and he's surrounded by all these officers, it's Jim that gets him out. And, you know, he's putting on this big show for all the cops around him as they're in like this interrogation cage. And he's kind of whispering, but he's got like this serious face to the rest of the officers, thinking that, you know, he's reading Batman his rights, or he's, you know, really taking it to Batman, and Batman's scared of Jim. And he's making the serious face, but at the same time, the stuff that he's telling Batman to do, like, he's like, okay, you're going to punch me in the face. And Batman's like, what? He's like, yeah, you're going to punch me in the face. You're going to take these keys in my hand. See these keys? And then, you know, he's like, okay, we're going to do this. And he's like, you want me to hit you hard? And Jim's like, yeah, I want you to really hit me. Batman's like, okay. Then Batman punches him. And then later, when they meet up again, Jim is like, hey, you don't really have to hit me, man. And Batman's like, I did pull my punch. And I was just like, oh, that was so great. I love the dynamic between these two characters. It's totally like the animated series, but if Jim Gordon was young, that's perfect. I also like how they completely got rid of the Nolan equation where they made Jim Gordon the beat cop that was on duty when you know, Bruce Wayne's parents were killed, and he was kind of like the same age that Batman's father would be. I like that he's just a little bit older than Batman. Batman's supposed to be in his early 30s. Jim's is probably, I don't know, we'll say mid 40s, like 45-ish. just a little bit older than Batman, but like not too old, so he can kind of hang out in the adventures. I think that's fantastic, and I'm really, really looking forward to that tremendously. So yeah, Jim Gordon, one of the highlights of the movie for me. Next up, we got to talk about Alfred's role, and it's pretty much a diminished role, um, which I was kind of disappointed with. I really wanted to see more of Alfred and Battinson kind of hanging out, and in this picture, you don't really get that. There's a couple sequences where he is speaking with Bruce on occasion and just kind of being like the Michael Caine Alfred a little bit, telling him he needs to keep up appearances and that he needs to remember that he is the Wayne family legacy, and Bruce doesn't really want to be a part of the Wayne family. What he's doing, he feels like, is fulfilling their legacy as Batman, and he doesn't really do much in the film. The only things that Alfred really does that I liked is he kind of helps Batman solve clues. He deciphers a lot of the clues that the Riddler does. They mention, just like in the books, that he's an ex-MI6 agent, and that's about it. Alfred's entire role in the movie is very small, just like the role that Jeffrey Iron was going to have in, just like the role that Jeremy Irons was going to have in The Batman by Ben Affleck, which is a shame that both Alfreds had their role cut short due to some spoilers that I can't really get into. I'll save for later on, but they do have a very limited role. For what I saw of Andy Serkis, I believe is his name, a guy who played the Claw in Black Panther, he was pretty good as Alfred. I like how he was able to stand his ground with a very rebellious Bruce Wayne. But if you want more of Alfred, you're going to have to read the prequel book, which I can't, strongly recommend enough. It's a really great prequel story, and it has a lot more Alfred in it. Let's talk about the Penguin. Colin Farrell, just wow. For me, when he was on screen, it felt like he kind of stole the picture. Like, the guy is literally larger than life. He looks nothing like himself. Talk about a actor doing what do they call it? One of those roles where they fully encase themselves in it. Method acting. Like, this is just, he becomes the Penguin. And not only is he the Penguin, but he feels like he's the Arkham version of the Penguin. He's not like this suave business guy. He's kind of like this black market dealer, behind the scenes, just like Nolan North's version of the Penguin. And he doesn't have an annoying accent. Like, I'm sorry, I don't really like the Penguin accent that they do from time to time, where they make him British and stuff. He sounds like he's from Jersey. He works in this setting. He's a very believable character. He's in the movie enough, and apparently the public loved him enough to really want to see a spin-off series with him. So we're going to get a Penguin series with Colin Farrell reprising his role in Gotham, probably after the events or a prequel to what happened in the Batman. I hope it takes place afterwards, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in this movie, which I'll talk about in the spoiler video, that they can really build an entire universe just on this 3-hour film after the events of it. But Penguin was definitely one of my favorite parts of the movie, as well as Amber. And he does interact with Batman and Gordon and Catwoman. And he's great in everything that he does. Like in the comics and the Arkham games, he is the owner, or runs the Iceberg Lounge in Gotham. When Batman meets up with him, it's kind of an interesting sequence that is ripped right out of the Arkham games. In fact, when I was sitting in the theater, I kid you not, I was thinking to myself, Batman, you need to counter more. You need to do this, because Batman takes a lot of shots in this movie. He's, kind of fumbling his way to success a little bit. So I was thinking, oh man, I'm better at playing Batman than Robert is right now, because, I would counter and I would break this guy's, bat that he's using to hit Pattinson, and, I would throw a smoke pellet down or all this other stuff, because I'm serious. When you watch the movie, there's a couple sequences where there's a guy in front of you with a gun that's like a red icon, and then there's a guy over to the side that's a knife that would be a yellow or orange icon, and then you have the other guys that are just like punching you. So, I mean, that was really cool that they managed to kind of surround him like the Arkham games. So I really love that. And then the Penguin, when he meets him, he's just like, whoa, 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 hang on, hold on. He's like, calm down, calm down. And then they have like this little meeting, and it's because Batman is doing this investigation of missing person, and he ends up running into the Penguin, and the Penguin is this very chill, nightclub owner. And then his role expands as the movie goes on, and I love that. And I really can't talk more about the Penguin until the spoiler video, but I liked him. Now, Catwoman had a very interesting role in this movie. She's very different than the other versions of Catwoman. Whereas they hint at some things about Catwoman being a lady of the night, this is literally the Frank Miller year one Catwoman, so she is a prostitute, most likely. She has the short hair, just like Catwoman had in the Frank Miller novel, and she works at a very shady club. She has a very we'll say spicy walk to her. She shakes her hips more. She wears a lot of revealing clothing. She works at essentially a strip club, or there's a strip club inside of the Iceberg Lounge where like all these elites of Gotham hang out. And she's definitely playing that Frank Miller version of the character. It's not to say that her version of Catwoman isn't bad, but I prefer the more Michelle Pfeiffer version. I would actually put the Catwoman performances at Michelle Pfeiffer is top tier. Then number 2 is going to be Zoe Kravitz. I really liked what they did with her character in the movie. And then for number 3, it would be Anne Hathaway, because Anne Hathaway for me was kind of the weakest version of Catwoman in the Dark Knight movie. I know. But I just was never sold on the idea that she was Catwoman. In fact, she's never even called Catwoman in the movie. She refers to herself as just Selina. Literally, Zoe calls herself Catwoman, or the Bat and the Cat. So she understands that she is Catwoman. So that was nice. So only Michelle Pfeiffer and Zoe refer to her as her comic book character, whereas in Nolan's, it's just Selina. So I like that. I like that she actually works with Batman in the movie, which you can kind of see from the trailer. They fight alongside each other. They work together. They actually meet up on a case, a missing persons case. Batman kind of ends up using her as his eyes and ears, involving the contact lens, so that he can get inside of the Iceberg Lounge, because it's, really hard for him to get in because he's Batman, and it's going to cause a problem. Not that he can't go in himself, mind you, but she has a better ability to do that. So he sends her in with a contact lens, and I love the banter of the two. She also tells him, if I look at these guys a certain way, they're going to think something, pretty off about me. And Batman's just kind of like thinking, well, I mean, literally, you work in this establishment, so... And she has her reasons for being in the club, but I can't get into it because it's spoilers. But she, works with Batman. She is kind of a spy for him. They help each other out a lot, which I really did like. I liked their romance. It was very reminiscent to Batman Returns for me, almost as steamy. I would say that Keaton and Michelle Pfeiffer were kind of a little bit more into it than these two. These two are kind of like, you want them to get together, but they never really get together. Whereas Batman and Catwoman feel like they made that connection in Batman Returns. In the Batman, it's like they could probably expand upon this in the Batman 2 or 3 or a Catwoman film if, Matt Reeves allows Robert Pattinson to kind of guest star in that, which I hope so. I hope Matt Reeves allows Pattinson to further himself as the Batman, to appear in these different side projects, the way that Ben Affleck appeared in the Suicide Squad and Justice League and other things, and made his presence feel known. I think that is something that Warner Brothers really needs to do with the Batman character. Like, Gotham needs Batman's presence to be felt. I like Catwoman's martial arts in the movie. It's a mixture of capoeira, judo, and a little bit of Muay Thai. I thought that it really fit her style. Her Catwoman theme, it was actually not bad. They did kind of the violin thing that they did for Michelle Pfeiffer's Batman Returns Catwoman. And I like that because it feels like that is what a cat would be like. It would be a violin. It would be kind of like playful but dangerous. And I thought that worked really well for her version of Catwoman. And I do want to see more of her. She's rumored to get a Catwoman spinoff, so I hope that actually happens and we get to have more of her. I don't like some of the things that she said and some of the things that was implied in this movie. So I'm going to talk briefly about some of the things I didn't like. I was not a big fan of the identity politics in this movie. I thought that they were something that is going to heavily date this movie because they weren't in Nolan's film, they weren't in Keaton's film, and it just felt a little preachy a few times. And the fact that they had the persons of color be the ones to say that stuff, whether it was the mayor elect or Catwoman herself. Catwoman basically targets people that she feels are people of privilege. She doesn't like rich people. And it's kind of hypocritical because she actually comes from a rich family. But some of the things she said, it just felt like Twitter talking points. It doesn't ruin the movie. It happens very briefly, but it was just kind of like, it was a little eye-rolling moment. And Amber and I both noticed it, and we're just kind of like, well, of course they're going to say something like that. But I really wished that Zoe wasn't the character to do that, because I'm going to remember it with her performance now. And it changes some aspect of her character a little bit, because before she was a completely cool character. She was a very strong woman that wasn't playing victim to anything. She took what she wanted. She did what she wanted. Nobody could stop her. And then she becomes a victim just like that victim mentality. And it was just kind of like, oh, well. The Riddler also kind of plays to that narrative a little bit, which also made me kind of not like him because he hates rich people. It's not really a spoiler. It's something that has been relayed quite a bit, especially in a lot of the different trailers and teaser clips that they put. The Riddler is only targeting people of power and people of wealth. And he feels that those are some of the most evil people in existence, and he basically murders them. So, yeah, that was pretty much all the stuff that I didn't like about the film. I mean, it's just minor nitpicking. It doesn't really take away from the film. It's just going to heavily date this movie years later, when that's no longer a popular talking point for Twitter and some other stuff. So, other than that, I mean, the film, it's so well done. It just is. Matt Reeves knows what he's doing. The characterization of Catwoman, of Gordon, of Batman, of Alfred is all spot on. The Penguin is amazing. It's probably my favorite version of the Penguin in almost any media. I kind of like this version of the Penguin more than the animated series, because the animated series, it felt like kind of a combination of the 60s Burgess Meredith Penguin, the 60s Penguin, wah, 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 and the Batman Returns Danny DeVito Penguin. Like, Colin Farrell's Penguin feels like kind of the definitive Penguin for me. I loved it. And I just, he was definitely one of the really strong parts of the movie. The chemistry of Catwoman and Batman could have been a little bit better, but just like I said, it's just kind of like playful romance. It's not like full-blown like life choice. They both throw out ideas that they could be together, but I mean, they borrow a lot of elements from the Nolan films, where I loved how people said that this wasn't going to happen, that this is going to be a Bruce Wayne story where he is, struggling with, doing his job and being Bruce Wayne. It's like, no. In the movie, they even mention the same thing, that psychologically, Bruce Wayne is Batman. Like, Bruce Wayne doesn't exist. There is no Bruce Wayne persona. There's no Bruce Wayne identity. He is Batman. In and out of the suit. He's brooding, he's shy, he's quiet, he's aggressive, he's aloof. He's Batman. Whether he's playing Bruce Wayne or not, he's always acting Batman, which Alfred should have told him that you need to distance yourself from the Batman because you act exactly the same. You both wear eye makeup. You're both like wearing grungy clothes, hanging out at night. I mean, Bruce literally walks around town at night with a backpack and his batsuit, and he's just wearing like basic like homeless man clothes and riding a motorcycle and changing somewhere in the city, and you literally see him putting on the costume and stuff like that, which Matt Reeves does that is because he's trying to ground the film in realism. He's trying to be like, okay, you need to see this guy getting ready for work and becoming the character that Gotham fears. Whereas you really didn't see Ben Affleck turn into Batman. He was just Bruce Wayne 1 second, and then he became Batman. You literally see Robert Pattinson in the beginning of the movie change into Batman, just like you see um, Zoe transform and put on the cat suit to become Catwoman. And the reason why they're doing that is because they want you to feel for these characters to make them more human in your mind instead of like these powerful DC fictional characters, which is fine. But I can tell you the difference between Ben Affleck and Robert Pattinson. Ben Affleck's Batman is Batman because he becomes the character. You never see Bruce Wayne put on the suit. You see him take off the mask sometimes, but he's still Batman. Whereas Robert, you see him change into the costume and you see that he's like this thin, kind of lanky, not really bulky guy. And he's taking on all these characters. So when you see him fight, you see him take a lot of hits. You worry if he's going to, survive these encounters. And, because even entry-level thugs are able to punch Batman in this movie. And Robert takes a lot of hits, which again, he's a young Batman. He's got time to get better. And you as the audience, you feel for this. There's more of a stakes. Whereas, I'm sorry, when you watched Ben Affleck as Batman, you saw this powerful figure that was indestructible or appeared indestructible, taking on the likes of Superman and aliens, and you knew he was going to come out fine. That's why him dying in the trilogy was supposed to be a big surprise for people. Like, oh my gosh, this is a character that we thought was invincible and he sacrifices his life. But when you see Batman on film, especially in the warehouse sequence, you know that he's going to wipe the floor with everybody in there and he just goes to town. When you're watching Pattinson on the screen fighting people, you don't know if he's going to survive. And that's part of the difference between his Batman and Ben Affleck's Batman, is because he's a Batman that's supposed to appear more human. Just like Keaton's version, he shows fear sometimes. Even though he's using fear as a weapon against people, he shows fear when he jumps off the Gotham PD building and he has to do his like flying squirrel bit, which I hated. He's terrified. He's got the police chasing him. He doesn't know if his wingsuit's going to work. He's showing that he is a human character in a batsuit. And audiences, just like with Keaton, they're going to rave about that because that is an important element of a film character for them. For me, I don't know how I feel about that. I liked it when Keaton did it, but Keaton was being stoic in Batman the whole time. There's a lot of elements in this movie where you can see that, yes, he's Batman, but at the same time, he's struggling at being Batman. He's getting knocked around, shot, blown up, and all kinds of stuff. And it felt like he was getting more hits in than he was like winning. It was kind of like watching the difference between Peter Sellers as the Pink Panther or Inspector Clouseau and what's his name, Steve Martin playing Clouseau, like the two different versions. Sometimes he's a very smart character like Batman is, but I mean he's a very humanized character in this movie, and I think that's why a lot of like casual non-Batman fans are attaching to this more than Nolan's film. Nolan's film, Batman became the character. He embodied himself as Batman, whereas it just kind of feels like broody Bruce Wayne, very sad, angry, using his angst and his loneliness on his war against crime. Which, it works for him, I guess, but that's purposely why they did that. Let's see, what else can I talk about? I want to talk about the movie's music, because this was another highlight of the film for me. I really, really enjoyed the composition of the movie. I felt like the composer did a great job. I'm not going to try butchering his name, but I like him more than Hans Zimmer. I really enjoyed the Batman Begins soundtrack because it was two composers with an idea of where they wanted to go with the Batman trilogy, and of course it didn't happen. With this guy, I can see him composing the entire Batverse, and I hope he does, because this theme could become the next signature Batman theme. What I love about this theme is it builds and builds and then releases to something. Whereas Nolan's Batman, the theme just kept building and 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 then nothing. This is actually a good Batman theme because it's almost like the Batman character himself. Like how the theme is kind of mysterious and creepy, and then you can feel it like crescendoing and really getting up there. Bum, 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 bum. You know, like it just keeps going and going, but then it has a release. There's no release with Bales. It just stops or it just repeats and it just, you know, where's it going from there? It's all the way up here in the ceiling, but where's it coming afterwards? It's not a composition. It's not a theme to me. The original Batman Begins theme is a theme because the other composer, Newton, actually did a better job. James Newton Howard, I believe, who it was, who worked with Hans Zimmer. And with him gone, it was just Zimmer's part without the theme, without the heart. There's actually soul to this music. Catwoman's theme is amazing. Batman's theme is good. It doesn't feel like the rest of the music in the movie is just noise. I really liked it. I bought the soundtrack. I think it's fantastic. I want to see more of it, hear more of it. Oh my gosh, there was so much that I walked away from this 3-hour movie that I just, I've been breaking up pieces of it in my head. I've really, really liked it. It's been fantastic. And I could literally talk about it for like another hour or two. And in fact, I could probably write even more about the movie. I don't believe I got into too much spoilers, so I will save that for another time because it does, lead into a lot of stuff that happens after the movie and things like that. But, for a first outing of this Matt Reeves universe, I really liked it. I liked how they didn't really do a lot with the origin. They showed some aspect of, Thomas Wayne and his importance in Gotham, but they never did a flashback sequence like they did in BVS. Whereas when they talked about the Waynes and the Martha stuff, they showed a flashback. There's no flashbacks, and there doesn't need to be. There was no hearing gunshots or him wincing or crying or anything like that. What happened, it impacted him. It changed him. But at the same time, it wasn't hammered home to the audience because the audience knows Batman's story, right? They understand what's going on with that. So I really appreciated that Matt Reeves didn't do that. And I have a lot of respect for him, the director, because this is a man that understands Batman the Animated Series. And the fact that he's talking about Robin coming up like in interviews, and he's talking about things like Heart of Ice and Robin's Reckoning and some really high profile Batman Animated Series episodes that just really spoke as inspiration to him. I love him more than Zack Snyder. I was never a Snyder bro. I hate that term. I think it's a derogatory. But I really respect Matt Reeves and his adoration for the animated series. Because for me, the animated series is the benchmark. It's the definitive Batman. And everything else just kind of is below that. It can still be great, but it can never be as great as the animated series. That's the pinnacle. And right now, DC films have not even come close to that, type of perfection. But I would say that Matt Reeves, the Batman, is gaining closer to the animated series. It's not there yet. It's for a first outing, it's getting there. Their portrayal of Batman was spot on for a younger Batman. I really wish that they would have filmed a lot of these movies back to back because I feel like, they might do a time skip and have Batman get a little bit older, maybe get into Batman year 3, year 4 territory, with some high-profile Batman villains like Mr. Freeze and maybe Two-Face and things like that. But I really feel like they're going to go more the New 52 route with some of the storytelling based on another villain that is met by the Riddler that I won't get into in this, movie review. I don't even know if to call this a movie review or whatever, but I really did love the film. I would give this movie probably a 9. Out of 10. It was very well done. I only had a couple nitpicks with the film. I didn't like that Batman had yellow trim on his boots. I understand they're supposed to be like fireman boots or something like that, but it's like you're telling me the guy just couldn't take 5 minutes to spray paint his boots. Christian Bale showed spray painting his suit, his military gear in all black. That was kind of like a little off-putting to me because it's like if you really look at Batman creeping up on you in the shadows, you can see the yellow trim of his boots if you look very closely, and it just like really makes him stand out more once you're able to fixate on that. And so when I was sitting on the theater and I'm watching him come out of the shadows, the first thing that I would see is the yellow trim on his boots, and it was just kind of like, oh, it's like, someone please, next time just spray paint. I mean, come on. It takes like literally a few minutes to do that. I want to see more buddy cop elements of Commissioner Gordon and Batman in the next movie. Definitely. I think that would be amazing. I want to see Zoe get her own Catwoman spinoff, whether it's like a mini series on HBO Max or her own movie. I think that the character has a lot more to show us, even though I feel like they might have rushed some aspects of her story that they should have kept hidden for the Catwoman When in Rome storyline, which is what they seem to be leading toward. But I can't really get into that because that's spoiler territory. And I want to see Jim Gordon put together an elite team of Gotham City police officers based on the cops that Batman interacted with in this movie. I think that would be great. I don't agree with a lot of the critics saying that the film is too dark. I do agree that I don't think kids should see this movie. This movie is just bordering an R rating, as it should, because there's a lot of gruesome deaths that the Riddler does as a serial killer. And that's pretty much it. That's all. That's all I really have to say. I need to kind of keep things non-spoilery, talking about like hidden characters and, you know, where the different arcs of the film go and, you know, things like that, using actual people's names and things. But yeah, I really enjoyed the movie. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. It's a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I had a lot to talk about. My script here, outside of the spoiler script, was about 10 pages. So 10 pages equals about an hour. That's pretty much everything. So yeah, 9 out of 10. The Batman, go see it. It's going to also be on HBO Max in 45 days. I'm going to watch it again and really, you know, put together some decent stuff about the movie. I thought that for the first outing, they hit it out of the park. I'm very excited to see where they go from here. I want to see some improvements with Batman's character. I want to see more Batman and Alfred banter. I want to see more Commissioner Gordon acting more like Jim. I want to see some, not necessarily humor elements, but I want him to be annoyed when Batman disappears. He just kind of was very nonchalant with things. And, you know, I think that it's fantastic for its first film. And I hope that they don't take too long to make the next one. But anyway, now I want to hear from all of you guys. What did you think of the Batman movie? Did you like it? Did you hate it? If so, let me know what you thought about it. I'm always curious to see what you guys and gals have to say. Feel free to open the floodgates of discussion. Just be really, you know, kind and considerate to one another. We have an awesome community here, unlike the Riddler's YouTube channel. So let's keep it, you know, fun and good. All right. Anyway, thanks so much for listening, guys. I have an awesome Batman prequel lore coming, discussing all the stuff in the novel about the Batman, both for the Riddler section and the Batman, and that will be coming pretty soon. So until we meet again, God bless and happy gaming. Keep it locked here for my spoiler video, which will be posting this weekend. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. All right, take care, everybody, and have a good one.